Hey guys, it's me, Michael, with ReCreate Church. There's a question that all of us have been asking for a while now, and it's when are things going to get back to normal? Normal. Normal sounds nice. I look forward to the day when I can take my wife to a nice restaurant, when I can take my kids to the movies, when I can go to the store and not take precautions so much, when I can just go and know that there's going to be a pack of toilet paper there for me. Because seriously, wiping yourself with a leaf is incredibly overrated. But what I miss most is gathering together with you folks, the people of God. ReCreate Church is my family. I miss you guys. I'm so glad I can get messages out to you through video and audio. Thank you so much for tuning into this message today. I know you could be watching the Golden Girls right now, so thank you for being a friend. I can't wait to be back with you guys in person. You're such an encouragement to me. I really miss you, and I'm not really even a hugger, but when I see you again, when it's okay, I'm a hug you so good. Unless that weirds you out, in which case I will not. I don't want to weird you out. So when we say we want things to get back to normal, this is usually what we mean. We want our freedoms back. We want to do the things we want to do. Normal sounds nice, but today I want to throw you a curveball. The idea that there are some parts of what we know as normal that we need to leave behind. Maybe you guys have totally figured it out, but one thing this pandemic has taught me is that I still have some growth to do spiritually and personally. There are some attitudes, behaviors, and patterns that I really want to leave behind. When life gets back to normal, so to speak, I want it to be a different kind of normal than it was, a better normal. I've said from the beginning that this COVID-19 crisis can be the catapult for positive change in our lives. Look, we've all got to go through it, right? But we get to choose whether we grow through it. This is the very heartbeat of God for you today. If you've got to go through it, grow through it. This reminds me of a time when God's people were at a point of decision. They were leaving behind a way of life they had always known. Now, it wasn't that good of a life. There were some real problems there, but it was the only life they'd known. And trying to live in a new way looked pretty intimidating. The story goes like this. It was about 1,800 years before the birth of Jesus. The descendants of Abraham were living in Egypt. They had gone there first because of a famine in the promised land, and they were received as guests. But after a few hundred years, they were so prosperous and so numerous that Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, began to see them as a threat, and he began to oppress them. He enslaved the people of Israel, and he made a law that said all the baby Hebrew boys that were born were to be killed. The girls could live, but with the understanding that they would grow up and marry Egyptians, so eventually eradicating the people group. So, the Israelites cried out to God for help, and he brought them out of Egypt. It's this incredible story where they literally packed up their families and packed up all their stuff and physically left Egypt. We know this event as the Exodus. But if you've ever read the story, you know Pharaoh didn't just let them go willingly. God had to get pretty rough on Pharaoh. Maybe you remember what God used to get the people out of Egypt. He sent plagues upon Egypt, like swarms of flies and armies of frogs and lots of other awful things. It got pretty nasty. Now, someone's going to say, well, do you think, Mr. Preacher Man, that this COVID-19 crisis is a plague that God has sent for some reason on earth? Well, I think it's a pretty bad idea to state dogmatically that God has sent the coronavirus for this reason or that reason. We just don't know. We don't have that information. It's a bad idea to say that you know that. But here's something I do know, and I can state very confidently that this crisis can be the very thing that God uses to bring you out of your Egypt, to bring you out of your attitudes and behaviors and patterns that are leading to a place that's going to mess up your life and mess up your relationships. Now, okay, let's get back to the story. As you might imagine, the people of Israel were very excited to be getting out of Egypt. And things went well until they got to a point where it got difficult. When they had gotten a little way out of Egypt, Pharaoh changed his mind and sent the army after them. And they were pinned between the Egyptian army and the Red Sea, and it looked like they couldn't go anywhere. They were so discouraged when they got to this point, so they turned on their leader, and we read what Moses said to them in Exodus 14, beginning at verse 10. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were very afraid. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, you have taken us out to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us like this to bring us up out of Egypt? Is it not that the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than we should die in the wilderness. Basically, they're saying to Moses, and by extension to God, did you just bring us this far to let us die? We should have stayed stuck where we were. The people said sarcastically, weren't there any graves in Egypt and you had to bring us out here to die? No, let me ask you this. You know your history. What are the monuments that Egypt is most famous for even to this day? The pyramids. And what are the pyramids? They are fancy graves. That's all they are. Egypt is a land of graves. Egypt was nothing but a grave to them. To go back to Egypt meant death. It meant slavery. It didn't mean life. It meant destruction, death. They couldn't go back there. But here's the thing. Egypt was the only life they knew. Going back to Egypt meant going back to slavery, going back to destruction. So why even suggest it? Because Egypt was their normal. Egypt was what they knew. They knew life in Egypt wasn't good for them, but at least they understood it. They didn't know any other life. This sounds so much like us sometimes. Chances are we know there's some things in our lives that are not really good for us, but these things have become our normal. Now, maybe you're the exception. Maybe you're at home right now and you're polishing your halo and you're looking down on the rest of us. But for most of us, we know we have some attitudes and some behaviors and some patterns that we really need to leave behind, but we have a hard time with it. Well, we know that some of our attitudes are hurting our most important relationships. We know that some of our choices are making our lives and our future more difficult. We know there's some patterns that aren't leading anywhere good, and chances are we know some things need to change, but it's not that simple, is it? Once you've established a pattern, man, it's really hard to change it. Even if you know it's not good, even when you know it's going to lead to pain and problems. Because why? Well, because it becomes our normal. It's the life we know. Now, some of you need to hear this big truth. Listen closely. Familiar doesn't mean functional. You may need to shout that to somebody. If you're in the room with someone watching this right now, listen to this right now, shout it at them. Familiar doesn't mean functional. Or just shout it back to me in the screen. Say, familiar doesn't mean functional. As badly as we want things to, quote, get back to normal, there are some things that may have become normal that we need to leave behind. It's time to leave Egypt behind. So they're complaining to Moses. Let's see how Moses responded. Verse 13, Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? Tell the children of Israel to go forward. They were at this pivotal moment. The point of needing to make a choice. To go back meant a return to the life of enslavement, but to go forward looked just impossible. That kind of feels familiar, doesn't it? We find ourselves at the edge of the Red Sea right now, so to speak. We're looking back on a life that we know had some issues. Life before COVID-19 had some issues, but at least it was familiar. And the future looks so uncertain, we just don't know what it's going to be. And the idea of just getting back to normal, just let me get back to normal, that sounds so comforting. But there are some parts of normal that aren't good for us. I just want to say to you what Moses said to the people of Israel. You don't have to do this alone. There is someone who's fighting for you. The Lord will fight for you. You can trust him. The Lord is fighting for you to be free. Free from Egypt. Free from the attitudes, the behaviors, and the patterns that you need to leave in the past. The Lord is fighting for you to grow through this. If you got to go through it, grow through it. In that moment, the people chose to trust God, and they went forward. Where are they going to go? There's the Red Sea. Well, Ha! God made a way where there seemed to be no way. He split open the Red Sea and made a dry path for them to cross. And they went across it, and when the Egyptian army tried to follow them, the Lord sent the waves crashing down on them and destroyed the Egyptian army. Now you need to read this for yourself. It's in Exodus 14. Don't take my word for it. Now right now though, right now for you and for me, what it seems like the most wonderful thing ever just to go back to normal. Normal sounds nice, especially if that means the return of our freedoms and the freedom to meet together with the church family. Now, technically speaking, we can reopen to the public for services right now, but there are some extreme restrictions, and realistically, it's going to be a little while before we're ready to do this again in our space because we have a smaller space. Moving people 6 feet apart is kind of hard. And more than anything, we want to get a clear leading from the Lord. In the meantime, though, there's work to be done. I believe God means us to use this time to make spiritual progress. If we got to go through it, let's grow through it. As good as it sounds to get back to normal, there may be parts of the old normal that we need to leave behind, that need to stay in Egypt. Just because something is familiar doesn't make it functional. Egypt is nothing but a grave. Egypt might be where we have been, but it's not where we have to go back to. The Lord is fighting for us to go forward. The Lord is fighting to give you not just back to normal, but a better normal. And you know what the number one thing the Lord has done for you and for me to make it possible for us to have a better normal? He sent us Jesus. Jesus is our Moses. He's the one that is leading us out of the slavery, the things that bind us. Jesus can show us the path forward through the Red Sea, so to speak. When there seems to be no way, Jesus can make a way. Jesus is greater than Moses because he's not just a philosopher. He's not just a great teacher. He's not just a great leader. He's God's own son. And making positive change, growing through this, is more than just about willpower or learning more truth or philosophy. It's about connecting with Jesus, and that's what we are about. ReCreate Church is a community of life and love, leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. We want to connect you with Jesus. So when we are able to open back up again, I want all of you with us. Now, some of you may have just discovered ReCreate Church through these videos, and you've never been here for a live service. Man, it is so much fun, and it'll change your life in the best way. It'll connect you with Jesus, and that's what we want more than anything. That's what we want for you to meet Jesus and have your life transformed by him. In the meantime, folks, we're going through it. There's no denying. And if we got to go through it, then we need to grow through it. You choose that. God bless you guys. I love you. Check out recreatechurch.org, and you can find out more about who we are, what we stand for, and that will tell you how, if you want to give to support the ministry, you can do that there. If you want to find old messages, go to the part where it says services up at the top, and you can find all of our videos, all of our podcasts. The links are there. Love you guys. I know you're going through it, but I trust God that you're going to grow through it.